Hi everyone! Today I'll be talking about OneShot, an indie puzzle adventure game developed in RPG Maker 2003 by Eliza Velasquez, Casey Nightmargin, Goo, and Michael Gurr, Shirt. In this video, I'll be focusing on the 2016 expanded version of OneShot, but I'll also touch on some of the aspects of the original 2014 freeware version. OneShot is a love letter to the RPG Maker community. It was originally released on RPGmaker.net, and it contains direct references to the specific RPG Maker titles that inspired it. OneShot's developers actually met through the communities for cult classic RPG Maker games, including the Yume Nikki or Dream Diary fan games. These are games that involve exploring and getting lost in a mysterious world. And by that, I mean literally getting lost, at least for me. Many of the areas loop infinitely, so they can be so hard to navigate. But it's easy to see how the world of OneShot was inspired by these games. Its setting isn't actually very big compared to the dream world in Yume Nikki, but it still feels expansive because of its large maps and maze-like twists and turns. OneShot features a world that is dying out and missing its sun, and there's a sense of melancholy that reflects that. The bodies of rusted robots cut off from their power sources litter the ground, and some NPCs will outright say that they think the world is beyond fixing. But OneShot does an excellent job of balancing these more serious aspects of the world with moments of hope, solace, and even humor. It's strange and dark, but it can be beautiful too. The prophesied savior of this dying world is the playable protagonist Niko. In many games, the player is meant to project onto a protagonist and embody them, but OneShot makes a clear distinction between protagonist and player. Niko is the Messiah on a mission to return the sun, and you are the god guiding them. This concept is very reminiscent of another RPG Maker game, Off, where the player is described as a puppeteer guiding a character known as the Batter on a sacred mission, although that mission is executed very differently than the one in OneShot. In OneShot, you have to explore nearly every area of the game and speak with many major NPCs in order to find all of the items needed to progress to the next region. In other words, exploration in this game is necessary rather than optional, and it has the effect of making the player feel connected to the world by showing where its inhabitants live, how they spend their days, and what matters to them. Since the denizens of the world look up to you, the player, as their god, it makes you feel like they're all relying on you. In the 2018 OneShot developer stream, Nightmargin states that the environmental storytelling and lore of OneShot was designed to give off the sense that the world is larger than what you interact with in the game. The player never sees most of the world, but you know that it's there, and you know that you've been entrusted with it. OneShot is a puzzle adventure game, which means that the gameplay revolves around solving puzzles in order to progress the plot. Many of these puzzles are standard for RPG Maker games. They tend to involve finding items and combining them, or using them on obstacles based on the hints found while exploring the world. However, OneShot also features several puzzles with meta elements. The solutions to these puzzles can't be found within the world of the game. Instead, key information is placed directly on your computer. It's jarring, because it messes with your expectations about what a game should be, and because the mysterious entity that speaks directly to you about these puzzles seems hostile and oddly fixated on Niko. Speaking of Niko, much of the game is about forging an emotional connection to them. Niko was deliberately designed to be a character that the player is meant to get attached to. In fact, they have cat-like features because the artist, Nightmargin, was very attached to the Pokemon Esper at the time of development. When a developer puts in details that personally appeal to them, when they put part of themselves into their work, I think that the care put into the character comes through in the final game. And of course, we all know that the internet loves cats. And then there's the matter of Niko's age. Niko is baby. They're shorter than the game's NPCs, and they wear oversized clothing, making them seem even smaller. It has the effect of making the player want to protect them. They're a child, no older than 10 years old, and that's reflected in the way that they navigate the world with a sense of wide-eyed wonder. As the Messiah, Niko can talk to you directly, often to comment on puzzle solutions, and to generally be adorable. But sometimes, the game takes away your ability to communicate with them, and it does so in a very deliberate way. The moments when you can't talk to Niko are the moments when they feel lost and afraid. They address you directly, but the game doesn't allow you to respond. You can't comfort this child when they need it the most, and it's heartbreaking. I also think it's notable that the player directs all of Niko's movements and object interactions. I think this really shows how Niko trusts the player's judgment and will do just about anything that the player tells them to do. If the player wills it, Niko will do it. They trust you, and they entrust their decisions to you. Now, this is getting to spoiler territory. If you haven't played the entire game yet, including OneShot Solstice DLC, please skip ahead to the end of the section. OneShot is a game that you should really experience for yourself. Don't let me spoil it for you. Now, I titled this section The Power of Choice because it sounded cool, but if you're watching this, you should already know that OneShot actually has a mostly linear progression. And if you don't know that, because you haven't played the game, what are you still doing here? Skip this section. Come back after you play. While OneShot doesn't have any decisions that affect the plot during the course of the game, it does have multiple endings. By the end of the game, the player has developed emotional connections to both the world and to Niko. So of course, the game forces you to choose between them. You can either give the world a chance to see the sun again, or you can return a lost child home to their mother. In many games, you could bypass a difficult decision like this by saving before the decision, watching the outcome of one of the choices, and immediately loading the save file and watching the outcome of the other. OneShot doesn't let you do that. Not only does it autosave, it doesn't have any real way to load the game at all. You only have one shot, and it makes the choice that much more difficult. This was the premise for the original 2014 version of OneShot, which was meant to be completed in one sitting. It was taken to the extreme in that version's bad ending, where exiting the game window would immediately shatter the sun and kill Niko. Not even deleting and reinstalling the game would give you another shot, and there was no way to interact with the game after you had made your decision. The expanded version has changed this by allowing the player to start an altered New Game Plus playthrough. But this still remembers your previous actions, and so the core theme remains. The impact of OneShot comes from its finality. This theme becomes especially clear in the Solstice DLC, the true conclusion to Niko's journey. The Solstice route can only be played after you've completed the game once, and it gives you the chance to both return the sun and to help Niko go home. You could argue that adding this route takes away from the impact of choosing between the two bittersweet endings in the first place. However, I think that the addition of Solstice is executed incredibly well, because the added lore is integrated so well with the existing world building that the conclusion makes sense while still being surprising and emotional. In Solstice, you learn that OneShot truly is just a computer game, in-universe as well as out of it. It's explained that OneShot is a simulation of a world that must be run on a god's machine, or the player's computer. The entity that's been contacting the player via the computers scattered throughout the game is the artificial intelligence that runs this simulation, and it's also known as the World Machine. The reason why the world of OneShot is dying is because this entity doesn't care about the simulation it creates. It doesn't care about itself. As an AI, it's programmed to follow Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, which are introduced at the very beginning of the game. The entity only cares about Niko, the only living person in the simulated world of OneShot. Another concept that's introduced early on that becomes incredibly relevant in Solstice is taming. You hear about taming throughout your first playthrough of OneShot. The very first characters you meet in the game reference it, but they can't quite describe it to you. The concept is based on the idea of the same name from The Little Prince, one of the major inspirations for OneShot. In that story, a fox asks the little prince to tame it, to bond with it, to care about it, and to form a connection with it. It's a long and laborious process, but it's incredibly meaningful. In OneShot, this concept is applied to robots. As a direct reference to The Little Prince, a fox character is the one to explain that taming involves suspending your disbelief to form an emotional connection with a robot. During this process, the robot can develop a sense of free will, and so it can begin to do more than what it was originally programmed to do. The conflict in Solstice is centered around how the entity cares about Niko, but not about itself. Just the thought of Niko being upset is so painful that it begins to implode on itself. It corrupts its own code, hurting the characters that you know and love from your first playthrough. But the entity never wanted to hurt anyone. It's just so confused and scared that it doesn't know what to do. It can't imagine a happy ending anymore. But at the climax of Solstice, Niko helps the entity realize that it has the power to heal itself and restore a happy ending. Because it's already been tamed. Because people care about it. Because you, the player, care about it. Let me explain. During Solstice, you're told outright that the world machine is a fake world and that it's just a game. But by the time that you choose to play Solstice, by the time that you care about Niko and the world enough to play again, by the time that you want to try to save both, by then, OneShot isn't just a game anymore. It's grown beyond its programming, and it's grown into something that will stay with you forever. So what do OneShot's developers use world building, gameplay, and choice to do? They form these relationships between the player, Niko, and the game itself, and they tell a story about how meaningful it is to care about things, even if they might not be strictly real. OneShot is a game about caring that also makes you care about it. And if you couldn't tell by the fact that I've been talking about this game for 12 minutes non-stop, I care about OneShot a lot. I mean, I found this game on RPGmaker.net before the 2016 remake, and I'm out here making a video about it in 2021. If you haven't already, please experience this game for yourself. And if you have, support the developers and follow their future projects. Night Marching and Gur are apparently in the process of working on a game called Margin Dream. And if you've made it to the end, thank you for watching my video, and for listening to me talk about OneShot for so long. This game is one of thousands of stories, but to me, it will be unique. Also, was no one going to tell me that the areas of OneShot are blue, green, and red, or from the center of the world outwards, RGB? As in, the system of light that computers use to display pictures in color? And of course this fits with the computer theming, but not only that, the names of the areas, the refuge, the glen, and the barren, also abbreviate to RGB. And it's so damn obvious in hindsight, but like, yeah, what?
And I only just realized while making this video that the tower is a lighthouse. It spins, and the top room where the sun goes is surrounded by glass. It's a lighthouse.